with sweat dripping down my forehead. Mrs. Sullivan answered the door and smiled at me. "Hey there, Miss Kara. How are you this summer day?" Her smile lit up the entire front porch like a million fireflies. I patted my suitcase, lifted my chin. "You're my new family," I said, and nodded for an exclamation point. Mrs. Sullivan took me in her arms, wrapped me tight, and allowed me to believe my proclamation with her pure acceptance. The sharp scent of paint thinner filled my nose, and I knew she'd been working on her oil paintings. She led me into the house, put up her paintbrushes, and cooked me a grilled cheese sandwich dripping in butter. Then she brushed my hair and sang me a song about a bridge over troubled waters. "Now, honey, tell me why you would want to run away from your beautiful home." I turned to her and shook my head. "It's just terrible. Daddy has changed too much. His face is always hard and stern." I scrunched my face up. "Like this." Mrs. Sullivan laughed, squeezed my cheeks. "He talks all low and monotone. He doesn't run through the rain with me anymore, or let me get extra sprinkles on my ice cream cone. He won't let me wear shoes in the house or get sand in the cuff of my jeans, or even bring home a starfish for my dresser. Says they smell. I've been thinking that the real Daddy will come back, that he's not really what everyone calls him, grumpy and moody. But 4 years seems long enough to wait for my real Daddy to come back, and he hasn't. So, here I am." The kitchen screen door slammed, and we both turned to her son, Jack, who came running through the doorway, sand flying out of the cuffs of his pants, shoes on his feet. "Hey, what you doing here?" he said to me as he threw his baseball cap on the kitchen table. I was stunned when no one yelled at him to put his hat in its proper place. "I ran away," I said, hit my palm on the table for emphasis. "Oh, you did?" He looked at his mom, then blew a large bazooka bubble. "Must have taken you a day or two to run this far." Mrs. Sullivan laughed, and it felt like a betrayal. I wanted to give a smart answer to Jack Sullivan with his dirty face and bubblegum lips, but tears found their way into my throat, then rose to my nose and finally my eyes. I turned away. I'd known Jack my entire life. Our birthdays were 3 days apart, and he'd never made me cry, except that time he'd thrown me in the river and I'd sliced my heel on the oyster bed. He lifted his hands in the air. "Oh, I was only joking, Kara. Only joking. You didn't really run away, did you?" I nodded. "My mama's gone, and now Daddy is too." Jack dropped the baseball glove I hadn't seen in his left hand. It was so much a part of him that I didn't even notice it. "What? Your daddy?" he said. Mrs. Sullivan held up her hand. "No, she just means he's changed." "At least he's around," Jack said. I glanced at Mrs. Sullivan. Pain flew across her face like a shooting star I wasn't sure I saw. I flinched as I thought of her husband, who came and went as the alcohol allowed. "He might be around, Jack Sullivan," I said, "but he's a different man. My real Daddy is gone." I straightened in my chair. Jack sat down at the table with his mother and me, took a bite of my sandwich, then punched my shoulder lightly. "You want to go help me find a conch shell for my summer project? I have to make a musical instrument out of something in nature." I jumped up. "Sure." Then I turned to Mrs. Sullivan. "What time do we need to be getting home for dinner?" In my home, punctuality was a god to honor at all costs, and I assumed it was the same here. Mrs. Sullivan stood, drew me in her embrace again. "Honey, you need to be at your own home by dark." "No, I didn't yell this or even have a fit, just stated the fact." She nodded. "This family is a big enough mess without adding kidnapping to its list of charges." I shook my head. "Well, I'll find somewhere else to live then." "No, you won't," she said, and pulled me closer. "Because you can come here whenever you want. And because if your daddy lost one more thing he loved, he'd be destroyed for sure." And I knew this was true. Guilt washed over me, and it tasted like the time I'd been slammed down by an unexpected wave, biting my tongue and swallowing more seawater than I thought possible.